Well, and I think what's so tricky here is almost like 50% of the book I agreed with. I came into the book expecting to feel defensive because she's, attacking my faith that I hold dear. And so I was really surprised when I found that my reaction was deep compassion and kind of this like, oh, I get it now. I get it now. I understand Alyssa Grenfell much better now.
I have a high level of skepticism, so I really like, Charlotte, that you're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I want to know who you are.
If you think coffee and weed are going to be there for you, they're not.
I can't think of a more affirming, personal experience than growing up in the young women's program where you're literally taught that you're a daughter of God. Oh, you're being mean. I'm like, look, being logical and skeptical is actually intelligent. Intelligent women are allowed to have intelligent conversations where we can poke holes and have a degree of skepticism that serves at arriving at the truth.
I was like, well, yeah, if you feel like you can't buy lingerie, go buy some lingerie.
The rest of the book is a whole different story.
That's the last chapter, is like how to leave being an ex-Mormon. But the reality is that she hasn't.
All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Word Radio Women. My name is Rachel. We have a packed list of guests today. We have Brittany, we have Tikla, and we have Charlotte. And today we are doing a long-anticipated reaction to a very famous, well-known book called How to Leave the Mormon Church by Alyssa Grenfell. And she's a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are all active members of the church. And so we felt like we wanted to respond to some of her takes, respond to some of her insights about the church, and also, as it is our religion and we still are experiencing it, kind of offer our perspectives on this incredible piece of publishing. So, Charlotte, I'll turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Well, I read this book twice all the way through, and I've gone back several times. It's very insightful. I learned so much about Alyssa. Now, as I've been watching her things, so I have to tell you, my kids found TikTok on my phone a couple weeks ago, and they're like, Mom, you have TikTok? I was like, don't worry, it's just to watch anti-Mormon stuff. Oh, wait, that sounds even worse now.
Oh, it's great.
It's for research.
What, Brittany?
I said it's for research.
It's for research purposes. Yes. So as I was reading this before I read this and I was watching her stuff, I just feel like she's got a story. There's a lot of anger and bitterness. There is a history with her family, with the church, or something. What is this beef that she has? So when I heard that she wrote a book, I was really excited because I wanted to learn where she's coming from with all this. So as I read this book, I actually talked to the publisher and found out that there were alternate titles that they were working with. So if you could pull those up, and I think these alternate titles are actually superior to the one, How to Leave the Mormon Church. The first title is How to Lower Your Moral Standards While Ignoring Your Better Judgment.
Okay.
We get to vote. I want to vote.
I totally thought you were serious, Charlotte.
Hey, look how official that looks. I am serious. Okay. And actually, they also had a children's version, which was How to Kill Your Conscience. And it's about watching Jiminy Cricket. Honestly, that is what I felt like this whole time I'm reading the book. She's like, even if you feel guilty while taking your first puff of weed, ignore the guilt. It's your Mormon shame. Just keep smoking. With coffee, with drugs. You guys, it is so funny. She's got a page. Actually, I appreciate this page. The coffee page. Because I've always wondered what latte mocha, Irish macchiato espresso. I've always wondered what those were. Now I know. She also has there you go, some marijuana if you wanted to learn more about that. And my personal favorite, all about LSD, magic mushrooms, and I can't even pronounce that. So
have you ever read
informative.
have you ever read a parenting book and you like start to read the parenting book and you're like, these are interesting takes, and you're like, you look at the back and you want to find out about this person and what makes them have these strong opinions, and then you find out that they have like a degree in something, and then they have a 3-year-old. Like, I have had that happen to me so many times where I'm like, you have no business giving advice about parenting. You could be raising a sociopath. So like, I have a high level of skepticism. So I really like, Charlotte, that you're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I want to know who you are. I want to know the person behind the book. Like, who is the person that has actually expressed these words on this page?
I like, and especially since it's not called How I Left the Mormon Church. It's called How to Leave the Mormon Church. It's a self-help book. And so I'm just going to start with this then. She's got a quote on page 19. So this helped me understand who she is a bit more and the struggles she has. She says, my depression was pretty severe as a kid. After I turned 14, I began cutting and using self-harm as a coping mechanism. This is something I've done occasionally throughout my life, a product of depression and anxiety. These manifestations of my unhappiness continued into college. And also as she was working in a school, she would get stressed and go cut herself in the bathroom. And now, even as a mom of 2, sometimes I still fall back into old habits. So this is tragic. Like, I honestly feel so badly for her. This is really hard struggle. And her depression, her anxiety, her self-harm, she's had suicidal thoughts. She started when she was 7. She had them a lot in college. That's why she went to therapy, and her incredible selfless bishop paid for her to go to a therapist every week. Her bishop's wife drove her there and waited for her during the sessions. So she has had lots of struggles. And so I really feel badly for her, but I'm also very grateful to know about them. I'm really grateful she shared them in her book, because that helps me understand her and her issues in life. And it also helps me, I want to give the message that do take caution when you're taking advice from her.
Well, and yeah, I read the book. I also read the book after Charlotte read it in preparation to do a response. And I came into the book expecting to feel defensive because she's, attacking my faith that I hold dear. And so I was really surprised when I found that my reaction was deep compassion and kind of this like, oh, I get it now. I understand Alyssa Grenfell much better now. And so I'm actually like, it made me even uncomfortable to be joking too much about it. Like, I know we're Word Radio and we're being lighthearted about things, but because I think this is very serious. Like, well, here's her experiences are very serious.
If she had these experiences and shared these experiences in her own circle and maybe wrote a book for her family, like, that's one thing. But having these experiences and then going and making this huge empire on YouTube, on Instagram and TikTok, hurting the church, saying lies, criticizing, getting people who are on the fence about whether they want to stay in the church, just really getting excited about leaving the church, giving them a reason to leave, getting people who aren't members of our faith, who don't even know any members. And now this is their image of us. Like, that's why I'm comfortable doing videos like this, is because she's doing a lot of damage from a place of being hurt herself. She is really hurting other people and completely misrepresenting us.
It's really important too to note that, like, I know that there's a line. I know some people will say, I get this on my channel sometimes too, where it's like, oh, you're being mean. I'm like, look, being logical and skeptical is actually intelligent. Like, we are allowed to have a critical thinking conversation about very obvious inconsistencies that we see. And that's just like a rational, intelligent way that a society functions. We're allowed to voice our concerns. We're allowed to voice our opinions, especially in that she's talking about our religion. Like, we are allowed to weigh in when someone else has opinions that are very critical about our religion. We are allowed to defend our religion. And the other so that's pushback to anyone that's like, you're being mean and women tearing down women. No, intelligent women are allowed to have intelligent conversations where we can poke holes and have a degree of skepticism that serves at arriving at the truth. And one of the untruths that I see, one of the inconsistencies of her book, which is she promises how to move on, how to leave the Mormon Church, and then how to move on. But that's the last chapter, is like how to leave being an ex-Mormon. But the reality is she hasn't. She has stayed in this limbo space where she has left the church, but she hasn't quite left the hating of the church and the anti-ness of the church. That stands out to me because I'm from New England, where everyone is Catholic or was Catholic, but I never meet people who define themselves as being anti-Catholic. I never encounter, I'm an anti-Catholic, but I meet people who define themselves by, I'm anti-Mormon. That literally gives me no information about what you do believe. And so she gives a promise in the title of her book, her sales pitch, like, I will help you leave, but she doesn't deliver on it at all.
And on the back, it tells you read this book for advice on, and the last one is Leaving Mormonism and Ex-Mormonism Behind. And I circled at the back of the book, circled it, underlined it. I was like, Alyssa, you are doing a terrible job of setting the example of how to leave ex-Mormonism behind by just attacking, criticizing, making content. So if you want your readers to leave it behind, set a better example. Brittany.
Yeah, it seems to me like, again, my heart goes out to her, right? That's a really hard trial to go through. And it seems like it's been a lifelong struggle. Where I would offer caution is it seems like she has substituted God and our religion for coffee, weed, drugs, whatever it is. And again, I don't care if you do coffee or drugs. I don't care. But if you are dealing with this, I would very much caution you to not turn your back on a church and a God that loves you. If you think coffee and weed are going to be there for you, they're not. And you are completely, if you're in a mental unhealthy state, you need people around you. You need God. God will always be there, and he is constantly reaching out to you. But if you're reaching for the coffee or the weed instead of him, you are literally just digging a hole that it's going to be harder and harder for you to get out of.
That's so true. That's so true. And I think it's just numbing. It's numbing out. It's not.
She's numbing the pain.
Be, how to numb out.
That's what I said. How to lower your standards and ignore your benefits.
Okay.
Numb out all the bad things. Yeah. All right, Tika, you were talking about.
So when I read the book, I had a pretty big takeaway from this book, and that is that I think. Well, I'm gonna get a little bit symbolic for a minute. That's what I do. Sorry,
the queen of symbolism. Here she comes.
There are the weird wizard in the woods. So I think there's two big ways that we can miss the mark when we're talking about sin. My favorite definition of sin is missing the mark, and I think there's two big ways that we miss the mark. One of them is, I would say, symbolically the left side. It's hedonism. It's eat, sleep, eat whatever you want, drink till you're drunk, sleep around, kind of this like, there's no rules, no boundaries, do whatever you want. There's those sins of the left side. And then there's the right side. And the sins of the right side are pride and self-righteousness and a tightness about the rules and kind of this like extreme insistence on just this like, self-righteous pride that goes along with the sins of the right hand side.
It sounds like puritanical almost.
Yes, very. And very, very much like what I do will save me. And I have to do everything right so that I'll be good enough.
And everything is very specific things you can do or can't do. And you have to do them right, or God hates you, or your family hates you. And everyone else who doesn't do those is a bad person.
Yes.
That sounds exhausting.
We cannot.
Yes.
What's that?
I said, that sounds exhausting.
That's really high anxiety too.
Oh, absolutely. And so I think in black and white thinking, right? This very like black and white thinking, it's very unhealthy. And I think sometimes we think, well, self-righteousness and pride are bad, but they're better. If you're going to err on one side or the other, it would be better to err on that side. However, who did Christ come down most hard on when he was on earth?
The scribes and the Pharisees, the rule keepers.
Right. And so he was most cautious. He wanted to caution us most about people who had sins of the right side. This pride and this self-righteousness and this kind of like deceptiveness on that side. And so, but I do think, to Alyssa's credit, I do think in the church, sometimes we conflate the straight and narrow path with being on the right side. So that right
with following all the rules.
Following all the
straight
rules
and narrow
really,
path
really
is
strictly.
following the rules. Yeah.
Yes, following the straight and narrow path means you never ever disobey any commandment ever. You always do everything right, and you're doing everything this way.
And
so
I think we've all encountered those
natural.
members.
Go ahead.
I said I think we've all encountered those members or leaders.
Well, yeah. Or I don't know, I've been there at times too. I've been on both sides. Like I've definitely fallen off the path on both sides of this problem in my life. And sometimes I know I've fallen off on the judgment side when I feel super judged. If I start feeling super judged by everybody, usually it's my own judgment that's staring me back in the face. Like if I'm trying to do something better, like I'm trying to make more meaningful prayers or something, and then I hear prayers that aren't meaningful and I start judging people, it's usually because I'm living on that area where I'm the one who's doing. Anyway, I digress.
So when you talk about this, it kind of reminds me of that bridge analogy that Elder Stevenson talked about in conference a while ago. There's
great example.
Love of God, love of man. They have to be balanced. You can't love God and his rules and his commandments and be so tight on this side because the bridge will break. But you also can't just think that tolerance of others is the most important thing. Eat, drink, and be merry, freedom, that there is no God who cares about things. Like that's loving man, just letting them do whatever they want. Like you've got to be balanced.
And I think that's what's so cool about having living prophets is because they can kind of like feel out the culture, feel out the people, visit with people and realize, what lesson do we need? Do we need to get pulled away from this left-hand kind of like free, there's no rules, do whatever you want? Or do we need to loosen up and relax because Christ has got us? And I think that center part is Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ is Jesus Christ. And he is the example of right down the middle of those two things. And he did it as a person. So we get to follow his example literally as a person doing it. We get to follow how he did it. And so do we want to play Elder Stevenson or moving on?
I think we can move on.
So there's all these Hallmark talks that talk about this. There's ones that talk about getting into the middle of the two, but there's also the ones that pull us one way or the other. We've got Beware of Pride, where it was like, okay, let's remember we're nothing. Or Joy in the Journey, where, President Monson was encouraging us, like, remember to enjoy it. Or more recently, the Gospel of Joy, the Church of Joy.
Tikla, can I just make a comment about your insight about prophets? Like I think with Alyssa, your comment about how grateful we are to have prophets, I think the ex-Mormon community and Alyssa Grenfell really over-focus on the rules of a religion. But what I got to be exposed to when I was in Islam and in the Middle East is what you have in Islam is this huge Abrahamic religion, and you have a lot of different schools of thought about how to interpret the Quran, but there's no one actually in charge. And so what you have is all of these different schools interpreting the Quran in, for example, jihadist violent ways. And then you have other people saying, oh no, the Quran is a book of peace. And so what Alyssa, like to your point about how prophets really do allow us to just walk right down the middle of two very bifurcated options in religion. In Islam, what you see is that there is no one calling the shots. There is no one saying, I know it sounds like, oh, they write all these rules and there's things we can't do. But the reality is that living prophets are able to designate things that are out of bounds. And what I see in Islam is a lack of prophetic leadership means that the religion itself has kind of gone into chaos in some places. And there's no one there's some places like Jordan and Morocco where it really works. And there's some places where obviously like Afghanistan, where it's just horrible, but there's no one in charge who can say religiously or divinely, like, these are the right and left limits. this is what's inbound and this is what's the spirit of the religion, whereas we have that. And so I think to your point, like it is a balance of rules and also pure doctrine.
That's fascinating. And I think
when we were,
go ahead.
Just, I'd love for you to, when we were talking about this earlier, you mentioned, she definitely suffers from scrupulosity.
Scrupulosity. So scrupulosity is kind of like a subcategory of OCD. So there's some people
real
who
mental
have,
illness that people
it's a real mental illness.
Yeah.
There's people who suffer from kind of an extreme level, I would say, of kind of like falling to this right-hand side, where it can manifest in lots of different ways for different things. Like there's eating disorders or like
cutting?
Workaholics. Go ahead.
Is cutting one of those kind of?
I think that would be unrelated, but
okay.
I mean, comorbid, but not scrupulosity specific. And so scrupulosity is kind of like spiritual OCD. So if you already have a tendency for this kind of like compulsive behavior, you can attach it to spiritual moral things. Or like some people have like hyper cleanliness issues or things like that. So scrupulosity is when you take moral and spiritual things to a really extreme compulsive level. And what I've noticed is it seems really common in former members of the church who have now gone really aggressive against the church, that they have this problem in common, that when they were members, they suffered from scrupulosity. That is my theory. Because you see, even in the, when Stick of Joseph went on John Delen's channel recently, and they were telling him about the gospel and they're like relating different things. And then John Delen says, well, that's not the gospel I was taught. That's not the church I was raised in. And I remember thinking, what? This is exactly what I know. This is exactly the gospel that they're describing. And so you can tell that he was in a place when he was in the church where he had an extreme obsession with the rules. Mm-hmm. The rules of the church were everything.
And you can tell that in Alyssa's book.
Yeah.
I wish I had a tally of how many times she said, I couldn't watch rated R movies. And then later in the book, I can watch rated R movies now. I just have to share my absolute favorite. I don't even have it here. I'll just get it. My favorite quote of the whole book is at the end when she's saying, oh, life is so great now that we're not in the church. She's talking about, Jack, that night, Jackson cooks dinner while I play with the kids. We're pouring glasses of wine. We say cheers. We clink our glasses. We click our wine glasses. We listen to Dark Side of the Moon. And she says, while this day feels typical to me, it's interwoven with moments I never imagined as an active Mormon. And yet these average, ordinary days are the most magical, beautiful times of my life. She says, from R-rated movies to psychedelic discussions, the discussions between Jackson and me are as vast and open as the expanse of the universe. Nothing is off limits. She is experiencing so much joy and fulfillment in watching rated R movies now and listening to music she couldn't listen to and doing things on the Sabbath she couldn't do and taking substances that she couldn't do before and wearing clothes she couldn't do before. Like her experience in the church was just what she could do and especially what she couldn't do. And you see her obsess over one thing that a church leader said about immodesty, or one thing that a church leader said about evolution, or one thing that her father said about this thing. So her experience, she says, if you want to pull that up, her opinion of the church is, her opinion of free agency, she says, the church's version of free agency is only a cage decorated with lacy white curtains covering the bars. So she's like, the church says you have all this freedom, but you don't. They have all these restrictions of these things you can and can't do. And it's a cage decorated with white lacy curtains. She is obsessed, hyper-focused on things she can and can't do in the church. And even now that she's out of the church, that's what she finds the most joy and fulfillment in, is being able to do the things she couldn't ever do and never having to do again those things that she was forced to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's so tricky here is almost like 50% of the book I agreed with. I was like, well, yeah, if you feel like you can't buy lingerie, go buy some lingerie. If you feel like you can't like go travel the world, go travel the world. Like, who was telling you you couldn't do those things? Like, please go do those things. And one of the fixes for scrupulosity is to go do things that you have deemed to be like dire, that will kill you, and then find out that you don't die. And so you can kind of see her.
What you're saying is like the moderation breeds moderation, and extremity breeds extremity. So like when you said the word OCD, it's like she actually is the same person. She's just gone from one. Yes, exactly. She's gone from like an OCD version of rule-based religiosity to a rebellion level of anti-religiosity, but it's the same OCD tick and obsessive compulsive, like to go from being like a hyperactive member to building the most successful YouTube channel, anti-Mormon YouTube channel out there in a year. Like taking on TikTok, Instagram, that is a full-time job. And
that's obsession.
You know, like you said, I think you're right. Like moderation is the way that you would heal something like that. But what we're actually, that's why I brought up at the point with, you know, why I like to look at the authors of books that I read about parenting, because I want to know who they are when they're prescribing stuff to me. So Alyssa Grenfell, it's helpful to know who she is and what she's dealing with as she writes these things, because she's saying, I'll help you leave. But the reality is she's just gone from one OCD side to another OCD side. And I have a prediction that in the next 5 to 7 years, we will see another intense OCD remake of herself and her life. Like it won't, either you are going to moderate yourself at some point, or you're just going to keep reinventing yourself in extreme ways. Like she kind of reminds me of the author from Eat, Pray, Love, who like Pray, Eat, Love. She like gets a divorce, she gets a divorce, travels the world, and the book ends there. But the reality in the story is she divorces that guy, gets married to a lesbian woman, gets a divorce from that woman. Like this author has continued to reinvent herself every single decade for the rest of her life, but no one tells that part of the story.
Yeah. Well, and I hope she finds moderation. And I think in some ways she might be better off right now than she was in the church. But it's not because of the church, right? It's because of her compulsion. And so I think,
Jonah says because he read it too, he said, she never could have been happy in the church with this mindset of being so hyper-focused on what she can and can't do.
She was blocking herself from the good part.
Could never have been happy. Yeah. So in the book, you can pull that up. One of the last ones, why Alyssa said she left. So she's got 2 sentences in the book on different pages. One is on page 18 that says, she outrightly says why she left the church. She says, ultimately, the church is false. I left because the Book of Mormon is fabricated and Joseph Smith was only a man, not a prophet, directed by a supreme being. So she says at one point she was doubting the church. She read the CES letter. Her sister had left the church the year before. And then only twice in the book does she say, I left because the church isn't true. The rest of the book is a whole different story. So on the slide, I say why she said she left, but then why Alyssa actually left, I've got 2 quotes that again emphasizes she really had problems with scrupulosity. So page 18, the upside of nothing. So this is like, at the end when you're out of the church, the upside of nothing, of no God and no church, is everything. Rules and constraints and judgment and doctrine and policies have vanished. Your world is teeming with endless possibilities. And then page 77, you no longer have a prescriptive set of beliefs dictating your clothing, relationships, weekends, and money. You get to choose it all. You're a kid at a candy shop with an unlimited budget. So this is the message, even though she says she left because it's not true, and she read the CS letter and could spout those things, she left because she made it too constraining for herself. She was too focused on the rules and constraints and the dictates.
And maybe that's how it was presented to her by those who taught her. I mean, maybe there was a combination of things going on here where it was a perfect storm and she really got stuck in some, I would say, damning thinking in the way that she was approaching the gospel. And maybe a break or I would hope that if someone is struggling this way, you would be able to find that freedom and that moderation without having to leave. But I also can have a lot of sympathy for her to go from that extreme level, I think coming undone a little bit. And then I think there's hope for a swinging to a middle place. And whether that's in the church or not, I hope that she finds so much happiness in a moderation place and that she can leave being an ex-Mormon. Like the promise of her book.
She should go to some
hoped.
Polynesian island, where they wear leis to church and they say aloha. And it's just maybe a lot more laid back there where she can just enjoy the good parts of the gospel.
Yeah, like one thing she always talks about too is like how she felt like her personality was at odds with the doctrine or the culture of the church. Like she wasn't allowed to have her personality. And I remember thinking, that was not my experience. Like I can't think of a more affirming, like personal experience than growing up in the young women's program where you're literally taught that you're a daughter of God. And you're taught especially in an era where like, I'm an elder millennial where like your sexuality and the way you behave is all of such value. We were taught like, no, you're valued by God. And then you're given an opportunity to be taught like God blessed you with talents that are unique to you and you're here for a purpose. And, there's nothing more validating to a young person than to know that, especially women, like you're loved by God and you have a calling and a purpose here. So, I mean, that's where it's valid that we get to kind of say, well, that was her experience, but as a member of the church myself, that was not my experience either. So she can't really speak to the universal experience of young women growing up in the church because a lot of us had really positive experiences, a lot of very validating experiences based on doctrine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had my son draw a little cartoon that I had in my head the whole time I was reading her book. I had this image in my head. So if you could pull that up, this cartoon, it's kind of in 3 sections. So the first section at the top, there's a beautiful, happy world right there. There's someone playing guitar under a tree, someone climbing the tree. There's a choir singing, there's kids playing soccer, there's frisbee, a human pyramid. There's a temple, there's other buildings, there's basketball, someone sleeping on the ground. Like, this is a beautiful world. And Alyssa is right at the edge, pressed up against the fence line, looking at this fence. And she is blinded by all the goodness in the world by this list of rules. And so one day, so she can't enjoy anything. All she's doing is thinking about what the rules are, what she can't do, what she can do, looking at the people having fun, pointing to who isn't following the rules, and also looking over the fence at people who aren't in this beautiful place, who are kind of at the edge of this cliff, who are like, they're drinking, they're smoking, they're having this they're evil, they're so bad. And so then one day she gets this idea. This is the middle section of the cartoon. She starts climbing over the fence. And she gets to the other side of the fence. She rips the rules. She gets to the other side of the fence, thump. And she looks around. Well, this isn't so bad. And Alyssa writes about this in a book. She's like, I got something from the vending machine. And I thought that the vending machine would just fall over and crush me because I was getting something bad. But it didn't. And I did this thing that I always thought was bad. And I was okay. So she's like, oh, this is amazing. So then she comes near the edge of this cliff. And at the bottom of this cliff, you can see there's people who have not made it, who have really gone far into drugs, who have really made bad decisions with their sexuality, who are controlled by their PORN addiction, and whose lives are ruined. But she's right here at the end of this cliff, very comfortable. She's got her bottles of alcohol there. And she's happy, right? She is at the edge. She's not worried about that fence anymore. But what is next to her? What is next to her? There is still a list of rules. And I want to read you the rules that she still has. And they're all laid out in this book. So if you thought, now that she's left the church, she's so excited to leave all these rules behind, oh no, she has more rules. As you could say, she's just moved the fence, right? Drugs, Page 147. A support network is also vital to mental health. So be wary of substances if you don't have loved ones to support. There's a big difference between getting a cocktail with your friends and drinking liquor from the bottle alone at home. Don't turn to substance as an escape. Okay, that's a rule with alcohol. Okay, another rule with alcohol. Page 161. With drugs. Do not get high for the first time when you have work or school the next day, because it's going to be a waste of a day, right? Okay. All right. Rule number 2. Don't do drugs if you have work or school the next day. All right. Next rule, page 163. When meeting someone, a weed dealer you don't know, always take a friend. Meet in a relatively public place like a park where you can be more or less alone while still having people around. Take steps to stay safe, especially if you're a woman. Oh, very good rules. Good. Okay. For your first time tripping, ensure you are in a peaceful, safe place with trustworthy people. I recommend having a trip sitter, trip sitter. Someone to sit with you who is sober or someone who has tried the drug before who can take the drug with you. That's page 166. Okay, with sex, there's rules with that too. It's not just the sky's the limit. There's rules with that too. Informed consent, protection, STD testing. Okay, with PORN, if you choose to watch it, it's possible to watch ethically. Ethical P word is made with consent. Performers and filmmakers are paid fairly for their work, and everyone who participates is treated respectfully. Okay, so that's the rule. Don't watch a violent, unethical P word. Make sure it's good and ethical. Okay, also, when she kind of hints at another rule with that. She says, when she first watched it, it was simply videos of naked people doing their thing. It was awkward and a little silly. Human connection is significantly more compelling than pixels moving across a screen. And then on page 197, my emotional bond with my spouse is deep rooted. So that's kind of saying, if you want to look at this, make sure you have healthy connection, like healthy human sexual connections first. Okay. Okay, with gambling, she says, if you gamble, be smart. Only use money you don't mind losing completely. Don't get drunk while gambling. If it may lead to poor choices with money, it probably will. Play with coins and dollar bills, not 20s, and definitely not with a credit card. Remember, the house always wins. Keep it fun. Gambling should be enjoyed, not played with intensely high stakes. Okay, so my takeaway from this is that, so she's just moved the fence line. There's still rules because she realizes that drugs, alcohol, unsafe sex and P word and gambling can be bad and can ruin your life. So she's just making more rules. And this is a lot of rules. Did you see how many words I had to say? I think our rules, our guidelines, our fence line is a whole lot easier and a whole lot safer. Our fence line is so far from the cliff. The commandments, the guidelines that Heavenly Father has set for us, because he knows what will just keep us so safe. I like the guideline, the fence of stay away from drugs, stay away from alcohol, stay away from the P word, stay away from gambling. That's pretty simple. I'm not going to get jumbled with that. And that's going to keep me really safe. I was talking with a couple at the Book of Mormon Evidences Conference in Utah, and they really stood out to me. They came into the building. There were a lot of older people there, a lot of gray hair. And this couple, like, they were probably in their 50s. They were really buff. I could tell, like, they're really healthy. They really take care of themselves, and they're covered with tattoos, but they're like holding hands and they're so happy. They're looking at all these booths, and I was really drawn to them. I was like, I've got to talk to this couple. Well, I ended up sitting next to them in the front row. They actually were so nice. They moved over so I could be front and center for Jonah's Batman talk. And I was like, you have got a story. I'm really like, tell me about yourself. And they told me about their amazing story of she was less active, and he wasn't a member. They got married, and they just got into all sorts of these things that can be very dangerous, drugs, alcohol. And he ended up in jail, and she was at rock bottom. They were separated. She had filed for divorce, and like life was horrible. And, her mom sent him a Book of Mormon in prison, and he read it and loved it. So he got out of prison, and he's like, let's do this. Let's do this. And it took her a while, but they came back like fully active in the church. They baptized the younger kids. And the most powerful part of this whole conversation was when the husband said, what a waste of 19 years. What were we thinking? I wish we had known about the guidelines of the church. Mm-hmm. What a waste. And that was so powerful because I had just read her book where she just is like, those stupid rules, throw them away, live your life. And he says, I lived my life and it was a waste of 19 years.
Well, and my favorite take on the guidelines of the church is it's not about just you. Nothing that we do in the church is just for your enjoyment or your pleasure. We find the deepest joy in doing things that benefit everyone, not just us. And so maybe you could sit closer to the cliff and be fine your whole life. Alyssa, I really hope that that's true for her. I hope that her marriage thrives. I hope that she can totally handle the substances and the experiences that she chooses to have. And I think the thing I'm most worried about is her distance from Christ, because I think that is the most powerful thing that the church offers. That is what we offer. However, it is maybe not true that someone following her same path would experience that same level of safety that she may be able to enjoy.
Because she has the foundation, the raised in the church privilege.
She's surrounded by good people. Yep. She has a family already. She has a good husband, her own family established. She has all of these things that came to her through the efforts of those who came before her. And so what I love about the Church of Jesus Christ is that we care about everyone. We want to live in a way that everyone can live and thrive in that way. And so maybe our guidelines are a little closer in from the cliffside than they have to be for certain individuals. But when we all choose to play together in that, I love that cartoon your son made, play together in that space where all the fun is happening, then we're not leaving anyone out. We're including everyone in this celebration of life and this journey back home. We're walking everyone back home, instead of just those who could handle it on the fringe, on the edges.
And I think, as coming from like a convert family, one of the things that's amazing about the gospel is that in the same way that Alyssa or people like Alyssa have had multiple generations of benefiting from the framework and paradigm of the gospel, or those right and left limits, they're probably naive or blind to the way that those right and left limits have benefited them. But from a convert family, I can see how generation upon generation is almost rehabilitated the longer you're in the gospel. So like in my family, so many generations have been ruined by alcoholism. And 2 generations removed from that, like we have such stable emotional families. And just that one small thing has healed 2 generations of my family. Whereas before it's like, so that's one thing that I see with her, she's going over by the cliff, but what are the lessons because as women, we also stand as stewards over our children and the generations that will follow us. And she's choosing a paradigm that might work for her, but that is being handed to her children and is opening up the next generations to things that she doesn't fully understand, because she's always benefited from the right and left limits of the gospel kind of circle. That's why converts come in and they're just like, oh my gosh, like I can see how my family tree is improving so quickly over time.
Yeah. I have a question.
We need to wrap it up. So question and any last words?
Well, so my question is, because I do think that over generations of time in the church, you can end up having a tendency toward the sins of the right side, because you have these people who understand it from their own experience, who are then teaching it to the next generation that hasn't experienced it. And I think sometimes we overemphasize what we know will make them happy instead of allowing space to make your own decisions or have your own experiences. So I'm just curious, if as parents, or as leaders in the church, what do we do to help people not fall into the sins of the right side? How do we help people to keep moderated? I mean, I know. I
just want to share one youth leader that I had that really helped in this aspect. She was a much older lady, and she was very proper. Everything was very proper, and it seemed like, what? This is not your typical young women advisor that you call, right? And so she walked in and she knew this, and she said, "Now, gals, I've been wondering why I was called to be your Laurel teacher. And it doesn't really make sense, but I prayed about it and I realized I am here to save you time." because she said, she says she's lived a long time. She's seen what worked and what doesn't work. And she's like, I've made mistakes in my life. I think she was a convert, and she's had struggles in her life. She lived in Saudi Arabia. Her husband worked in oil for a long time. Oh, that's right. She was a convert. She converted in Saudi Arabia. And she's like, I'm just here to save you time. So I'm going to teach you the gospel. I'm going to tell you the standards. And if you want to follow them, great, because it's really going to save you time.
I love that.
Cute.
I think, like Tika, answering your question, I think just being authentic in Sunday school, don't just say the church, basic answers. Share your lived experience. Share, your own thoughts and opinions. Go out on a limb. Be vulnerable. Be authentic. And watch Word Radio.
No, that's a real thing. That's a real thing. I have a friend who told me that she struggles with scrupulosity because she had a rebellious teenage years, and she tried all the things. And then she came back to the church, and it just saved her. Not just the rules, but obviously her relationship with Jesus Christ. And so she says, but she falls into scrupulosity because she's so scared that her girls are going to do the same thing she did, that she's just really white knuckling these commandments sometimes. And she says watching Word Radio helps her not be let go of some of her scrupulosity and let go a little bit. And I love that. Yes. More Word Radio.
Okay, Rachel, I know you had a few more things in the Discord. Did you want to cover those in the last couple minutes?
We can do it another.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. This was awesome. And Alyssa, you're welcome for buying your book. I hope with the proceeds you buy some of your, what do you call it? Devil's sinful juice. I think that's what you call it. Coffee.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Enjoy the profits from your book, from us buying it. And for this and more, check us out at wordradio.com. Devil's bean juice. That's what she calls it. The devil's bean juice.
Bean juice. Oh, okay.
That's what she calls it. Can we do that ending again? I want to get it right. I'm just going to do the ending.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We assume if you made it this far that you liked our content. So please make sure that you smash that like button and you share this video with your friends. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet to our channel, please make sure that you subscribe and you press the alert button so you receive alerts on every one of our daily uploads. Now, we want to make sure that we keep all of this content flowing for free to you, the viewer. And to do that, we need your help. If you're a person of means, please consider a direct contribution through Venmo or through Zelle. And the links to those platforms will be in the description as well. Also, if you want to help us out, please make sure you buy some of our merch. We got really cool hats, really cool t-shirts for both boy and girl viewers, all available on wordradio.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our Ward Radio newsletter. And finally, if you guys want to help out purchasing some of the equipment in the studio, you can always check out our Amazon wish list that is also available in the description of this video. And either way, whether you're pressing this button here to make sure you're subscribed to our channel, or whether you're watching another video here just because you like our stuff, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next program.